Okay, welcome everyone. I have a very special guest with me today. Her name is Jacqueline or Jackie Gwynne, and she actually many years ago used to work in a brothel in Australia. Of course, that whole industry has been legalized in Australia, and she worked as a secretary there. And over the course of her working there, her eyes were just completely open to how horrible this sex industry is and what all has happened there. And so she's written several articles. She's also been featured, her story's been featured in a book called The Prostitution Narratives, which she did not have control over that title. That's just how what the publisher decided. But I'm going to let her basically start from the beginning and tell us, how she first got involved in this industry, and then, her story about how her eyes were opened and what she's all found out about this. So Jackie, welcome, and go ahead.
Hi. Well, I started working as a receptionist in the sex industry in Melbourne, Australia. I think it was around 2009. I was studying at the time and looking for work and couldn't find work, and someone told me there was a job, going as a receptionist in a brothel. And it was a legal brothel and marketed itself as a high-end, if it was ever going to be, if the sex industry was ever going to be safe or glamorous, it would be in this place. And I'm not going to say the name of it. It's not there anymore. Just for legal reasons, I'm not going to mention the name of the brothel, but it was in Brunswick, and which is not far from Melbourne City. And I ended up working there. And I was kind of, the industry is glamorized. I had a fascination with the industry for a long time. Watching movies, and, there's a TV show that was being screened at that time when I was working called Satisfaction. And it was a story about women, working in this glamorous high-end brothel. And one of the women was an escort. And I just thought, oh wow, these women are really glamorous. It just looks like such an exciting, cool career. But I saw the inside of the industry, and it's not glamorous. I was exposed to a lot of pornography as well in that job. Up until that time, I thought, well, if women choose to do this, then that's fine. How is it any different from doing massage or working in the mines or whatever? But I can tell you that the women there who technically did choose it. I would speak to the women every shift, and you'd be sitting there for 13 hours, like it was a night shift. So there's a lot of sort of sitting around just talking. So I talk to the women every night, and I can honestly tell you that I don't believe that any of those women really chose it or wanted to be there. It was really a last resort. There was women, women that were sort of at university. They weren't, intelligent women, but down on their luck. One woman needed urgent dental surgery and didn't have the money, so that's how she ended up in the industry. And you get stuck there. You become trapped in the industry because that becomes your world. And it's legal in Victoria, Australia, and I think it's illegal in Queensland. Now, I think if it was ever going to be a normal industry for women, it would be in this, in this state where it's legal, which it has been since 1994. But every woman that worked there, I would say that the majority didn't tell their friends or family. They would tell them that they were doing something else, like doing night cleaning or packing, or they would make up some story about what they were doing. So, that's not normal, is it? That's not a normal job when you have to invent, a story because you don't want your family to know about it. And even me as a receptionist, like, there was still this stigma that, what you were doing wasn't right. Like, I couldn't even talk. I mean, I come from a good family, and my mother refused to talk to me about it. Like, and in this industry, like, if there's anything that you need to talk about with your family, it's this one, because some of the things that you see and hear are just really quite unpleasant. Sort of lost my train of thought.
Let me jump in. So you were just the receptionist right at the front end.
Yes.
Tell us about some of the abuse or the horrible things that just as a secretary you experienced in this industry.
Okay, well, everything about this industry, like even the phone calls, it is sexual harassment. That's, you have porn on big screens playing in every part of the place. Like, there was one at reception, and they had a porn room where when the men came in, that's where they sat, and we did the introductions, and they met the women. Up until that time, I thought, I didn't have a problem with porn. I thought, oh, well, what's the harm in, watching people having sex, but the porn that I was exposed to, I mean, this was just normal, mainstream, nothing, kinky, just straight up, heterosexual porn. But it was, I felt traumatized by what I saw, and I can, even though it was 10 years ago, I can still see the images in my head. Like, the women that were in this porn, they didn't look like women. They looked like 14-year-old girls. And when the men, also, I saw the impact that the pornography was having on the clients that came into that place. And I also saw in my own relationships, the impact that porn was having. My partner at the time, swore that he didn't watch porn. And I had every reason to believe that he wasn't watching pornography, but he was just the requests that you get, it can't come from any other place except for porn. But yeah, when the men would come into the brothel, they would request exactly what they saw in the porn, including the way the women looked. They wanted them to be young, skinny, blonde, and to do the things that they saw in the pornography. And I don't want to sort of get too graphic here, because in case my mum ends up watching this, but yeah, every client wanted anal sex, and when they rung up, and I really don't know any of the women there that wanted to do anal sex. Like, that was considered an extra service. Like, you get a basic service that was, I think it was $120 for an hour, and that was just basic sex, massage, and oral sex. If they wanted anything extra, they had to discuss with the girls, and anal sex was an extra, and kissing was an extra. Sort of kinky dressing up, S&M, that was considered an extra. And that's how they made their money, by doing extra services. But I really can't, I don't remember any of the women wanting to do anal sex, except for two who were drug addicts. They were, like, a lot of the women in the industry, if they're not addicted to street drugs, they're addicted to prescription drugs. Because just to get through the night, like, if you're sort of having sex with, I don't know, on average, the women that were busy, they would have 8 clients a night. So if you're having 8 clients and having, and these men aren't sort of gentle, caring men, they, it's, if they're paying, they'll get, and if they're paying for an hour, they will, sorry, I just don't want to be too graphic and say swear, but
on that, I just mainly wanted the audience to see that you went into this thinking, oh, this is not that bad, this will be fine, and you came out of it realizing that this is an absolutely horrible industry, and totally just treats women like cattle, basically, and exist. So let's jump forward in time now to when you got out of this industry and you started working against it.
Well, at the time when I was working there, I was studying illustration. I was doing a Bachelor of Illustration, and I was so much in support of the industry that I was planning to write a graphic novel about the industry. And it was sort of going through that process that I just began to really get clear that there wasn't any way that I could make this industry appear empowering or good for women. There's just nothing about it that is even remotely good or healthy about it. It's just, I mean, even sort of working night shift, because that's the, the average sex worker, they call them, but it's really not work. It's not a normal job. So any woman that's working in prostitution are working night shift. And if you're just working one night shift a week, you're in a permanent. It's like you're in a permanent state of jet lag. I was doing two shifts a week, and you never really feel like you catch up. You always feel like you're in a jet lag state, and I was like that for 2 years. So. Yeah, so when I was writing, I was commissioning stories by women in the industry and I was going to illustrate their stories, but it just did not come together. And when I sort of had that realization that no, this is not, I can't write this. I'm not carrying through with this novel, and ever since then I've been speaking out. And I started by speaking out about pornography, and got a lot of backlash. A lot of abuse online. Like I've been banned on Facebook 7 times for a month each time for speaking out about pornography, the sex trade, and also pedophilia as well. So that's why I think that these social media companies are actually profiting from porn. I can't think of any other reason why people like me that are speaking out and like Fiona Barnett, Isaac Cappy, a lot of those people, they're getting banned on social media because we're affecting their profits. Because if you go, I've been banned by Twitter now. I got up to 5,000 followers, and they banned me because I must have been too influential. I don't know. They never gave me a reason why I was banned. But there's pornography all over Twitter. I mean, you open up your Twitter account, and there's porn in your face, and it's live action porn. So why do they silence me but allow all this pornography and there's groups on Facebook called Legalized Pedophilia. And those groups are allowed.
Yeah.
But women like me, or people like you as well, where we're being silenced, and it's because we're affecting their profits.
Right. Yeah. So talk a little bit about how child sex trafficking plays into this whole thing.
Okay. In Victoria, where it's legal, what happens when the sex trade is legal is there's a huge demand. It's normalised, and at the moment there is 700 illegal brothels in Melbourne. Now the official count is 500, but they're still counting. I work for an organisation called Pink Cross. The 500 count, I can verify that if anyone is interested in, knowing about getting sources for my statistics. But yeah, the organisation I work for, Pink Cross Australia, who helps to assist women out of the sex industry, and also we're campaigning for the Nordic model, which is about changing the legislation to stop the demand. And prosecuting the pimps and the traffickers. So yeah, what's happened now? Like I keep a bit all over the place. Yeah. So yeah, the organisation I work for, Pink Cross Australia, I don't personally, but the CEO and founder, Genevieve, she goes into brothels every week to talk to women. She also talks to the brothel owners. And one of the brothel owners said to her, there's way more than 500. He guesses there's probably about 700 illegal brothels. And in these brothels, and it's the demand that's fueling this. It's the men that are buying sex that are, creating this demand for all these illegal brothels. And where I live, which is probably about half an hour from the centre of Melbourne. It's I don't want to sort of say what suburb I'm in, but there's a lot of illegal brothels, and I know what they look like because I've been researching and following the industry, and they call themselves Thai massages. Like if you see a Thai massage parlour where the windows are covered, a lot of them are illegal brothels, and women are trafficked from Southeast Asia in those brothels. And look, none of the politicians seem to be taking responsibility for this. And as I said about Facebook and the social media companies, they've got to be benefiting from these businesses, and the police as well. Like, why aren't they doing something? They know they're there.
So you're saying there are actual we understand these brothels are legalized in Australia, but you're saying that there's actually illegal brothels that are taking in children, small children. Okay.
I don't know. I've not sort of been inside. That I know in America, there's people sort of going in, and I couldn't tell you who they are inside these brothels. But apparently I don't know if they're children. I would say they were young women.
Okay, so but from your experience, at least, you see that these men are wanting the women to obviously look really young. Which of course is sick in and of itself. But okay, so are you then? Because I know you mentioned in some of the correspondence that we had that you do believe that this women trafficking that you've seen with your own eyes is tied to the child trafficking. Can you go into that a bit more of how you see that in Australia?
Look, that's not an area that I know much about, but I do know that it's the sex buyers that are creating this demand. There's when I was working at the reception, I would answer the phones. Like when I got that job, I was told, you're just in the business of selling rooms. You're just renting rooms, but I wasn't. I was selling the women. I had to, introduce them to the clients and tell them a bit about them and describe them, and when the phone calls that I would get, that I would also have to sell the women, and one of the most common question you would be asked is how old they are, or have you got any new girls? Like every phone call just about was, have you got any new girls? And that is code for young girls. Okay. And the place where I was working it's closed down now because there was a 14-year-old girl working there. I didn't have anything to do with hiring the women who work there, but anyone who walks into a place like this will get a job. Any woman, they would never say no to anyone. Any woman who walked in there and wanted to work could just go in and just start working. No skills, you don't need anything. Just walking off the street and say, can I start working here? They would probably let you. And they needed a ID, but it's easy to get a fake ID on the internet.
Right. Okay.
So there was a 14-year-old girl working there, and I don't know if they knew or there were girls that were working there that I doubt whether they were 18.
Right.
Yeah,
I'm sure they're not I'm sure they're not regulating themselves with how seedy you're describing these establishments.
No. I mean, if the industry is ever likely to be regulated, it would be when it is legal, and there was no regulation.
Right.
None at all. Like I work in a sort of irregular job now, and we have it's called work safe, where they'll just turn up and sort of, you know, just look around and just make sure everything's, you know, the occupational health and safety guidelines are in place. And look, if they walked into any brothel, they'd be closed down in 5 minutes, because every shift there's abuse, there's violence. Every shift there was an incidence of abuse, verbal abuse, violence, men being rough with the women. Yeah, and there was panic alarms. They had panic alarms in every room, but they were never used, because it's just kind of the women just it's just part of the job. Abuse and rough treatment, they just, you know, you just accept that as part of the job.
Right. So let's talk about this march that you were involved in recently. Why don't you tell everyone about that and what happened there?
Okay, well, there's the International Women's Day March in Melbourne, and we decided we were going to march to end sex trafficking and for the Nordic model. So we sort of put posts up to invite people all around the world to march. We ended up, we put a call out for men and women to march, and we ended up with 14 women marching. And we had signs sort of, one of them was sex buyers fuel sex trafficking, end the demand, Nordic model now. That was one of my signs. And yes, signs to do with, another one said the average age of women in prostitution is 13, and in some places it's actually 12.5. So 12 and a half years old, that's the average age of entry into prostitution. So a lot of the women that are working in prostitution were trafficked as children. That's a reality of it. Because to sort of I would say that most of the women in that industry come from backgrounds of dysfunction, domestic violence, sexual abuse, and probably working in, even homelessness. But to work in a clean, and it was a clean, tidy place, and there were women that were living there as well, living in the brothel, which I don't even know if that's legal. Sometimes it was like 2 women living there. So to come from a background of abuse and violence to be in a clean brothel, like that's probably normal for a lot of women. Anyway, so back to the march. We planned this, and the organisers of the march, women like me, where for a long time I've been involved in the radical feminist movement, which is against pornography and the sex trade. That was how I got involved. But we're silenced and called a SWERF, which stands for Sex Worker Exclusionary Radical Feminist, or TERF, which is Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist. And all we're doing is standing up for the rights of women, to protect women's spaces. We don't hate anybody. So anyway, there was this big witch hunt, and it was planned. It was quite obvious that the organisers of this march had planned to, they didn't want us there. So when we were harassed at the march, the organisers of the march were chanting and inciting the crowd. There was probably, I would guess, about maybe 12,000 people marching, and the organiser of the march, which is the union, had planned this campaign to just bully us. Like, they were chanting on loudspeakers, and like there was hundreds of people chanting along, saying, hey, ho ho, Turks and Swerfs have got to go. And we had people trying to intimidate us. and getting pushed and shoved. There was women that had their signs taken away from them. One woman had her phone knocked out of her hand. And see, the people that are involved in organising this women's rally are from the sex trade lobby. Like, one of the speakers was from the sex trade lobby. So they're in the interest of keeping women in the industry. They claim to be speaking for sex workers' rights, but and standing up for women's choice. But I can tell you, from what I've seen, women aren't choosing this. It's a last resort, and I think that women deserve better choices. They deserve. See, the women that I worked with, like, some of them were studying, but most of them were, just had no other options. They had no skills, no family support. When I was saying that most of them have drug addictions, if they don't have a drug addiction, they've got some other addiction. And gambling, there's women that have gambling problems. And also lifestyle addiction is another addiction, being addicted to sort of, fancy lifestyles and, cars and whatever. But none of the women, like, I've been working with Pink Cross for a long time and researching this industry, and they say that this industry is a means for women to escape the poverty cycle, but the women in this industry never escape the poverty cycle. There might be a couple, but they generally don't, because the money that they make is spent on drugs, and also because the men want young women. Women also have addictions to plastic surgery and and all the sort of clothing and stuff, things you have to spend your money on to make yourself look young and sexy. They cost a lot of money, including lingerie.
Right.
Yeah.
So you were talking about legislation that you're hoping for to strike at the demand, so that the demand is.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
Okay, well, there's the Nordic model, which was brought in Sweden in 1999. It's been quite effective to cut down trafficking. They've cut down street prostitution by 50% and cut down the demand. Like, it's just sort of instigated this cultural change where men aren't buying sex. And it works by criminalising the traffickers, criminalising the pimps, and also the sex buyers. And it also helps to women that are sort of at risk of entering the industry, they're supported. The women that want to leave, they are supported with education, and education is made free. Because a lot of the women sort of get trapped in this sort of poverty cycle and end up sort of getting trapped in the industry, paying their student debts. So that's one part of the Nordic model as well, is just removing student debts and student fees. So they're able to, the Nordic model. And also in the sex industry, prostituted women are at higher risk they've got a higher mortality risk. They've got a 40%, their chance of mortality is 40% higher than the average woman, whether it's through murder, illness, or suicide. So in Sweden, there's been, since they've brought in the Nordic model, there's been no murders of prostituted women by clients.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, so it's actually working. There's I think they brought the Nordic model into France, Ireland, and we're campaigning for it here as well.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Very good. All right. Well, Was there anything else that you wanted to touch on or let my audience know about this whole issue?
Well, I think as well as the sex industry, like the Nordic model focuses on the sex industry. I think pornography needs to be, we need to take a stand on that and cut that down, the demand for pornography, because these children, like you talk about sort of children being trafficked and women being trafficked, a lot of them are trafficked in that porn that, the men are masturbating to. So we've just got to stop the demand for pornography and the sex trade.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've actually read articles that talk about how pornography, when you watch pornography, it creates these tracks in your brain and basically like ruts in your brain. And your brain is supposed to constantly be, making new pathways and having new synapses firing and all this stuff. But when you watch pornography, it stops that from happening. And so
Yeah.
even at a physiological and a psychological level, it damages you. It damages you and damages who you are, turns you into a monster rather than being a person. So,
Yeah.
of course, I believe that the ultimate way of removing the demand for that is repentance, turning to the Messiah and falling in love with him, and then that demand.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
so do you know of, is Australia considering, or are you working for any type of legislation to address the pornography issue specifically?
Look, I speak out about it. I'm involved in street art activism, and just informing people and getting information out through street art, and also memes, like graphics I make and I share them on social media. So yeah, just in sort of an education role, I guess, just because I think it's about public education, that we can just change the culture.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, making people more aware of what's going on. That
Yeah.
pornography is using women and children that, no woman and certainly no child should ever be used in such a way.
No.
Definitely not a victimless crime. That's for sure.
No. No, it's not.
All right, very good. Is there a way that you would like, if people want to reach out and contact you, is there a way for people to do that?
Well, I don't have any profiles on social media anymore, but if they want to get in touch with me, they can contact you, I guess, or through Pink Cross Australia.
Okay, okay.
Yep.
What I will do is I'm going to link a series of these articles that you've sent me. I'll link those below the video, and people can kind of read some of the stuff that you've written.
Yep.
Very good. Okay, well, Jackie, I appreciate you being on. I want to make sure I give you the last word. Is there anything else that you want to touch on before I end the interview?
I was just thinking what when you were asking about what I think what people are lacking is connection, like the pornography addiction, and also the sort of the sex trade. I've met the men that sort of go to these places are lacking connection, and I practice Buddhism, and I just think, look, coming from a radical feminist platform, I mean, that's not my only platform. Like the truth movement, I've really been sort of following recently, and I just find, if to speak about organised religion, I get backlash about, because Pink Cross Australia are faith-based. But I think religion or a faith is, it's very important for people. It's a way of getting connection and community. As I've said, because I speak out, I have copped a lot of backlash and been subject to a lot of bullying, which brought me back deeper to my Buddhist faith, where I'm loved, and I yeah that's one thing I recommend to people is take up a spiritual faith.
Yeah, and I also think just sort of the other side of the coin to this is also if men could understand and fully realize the horror of what these women, well, children, I think they should know anyway, should not even be in this industry, but even, you know, older women who might be looking at through pornography or going to a brothel or whatever. If the men can understand the horror of what these women are going through, okay, then it might help them realize, this thing is disgusting. I don't want to have anything to do with it, because I don't want to be promoting an industry or helping a business that's causing so much hurt and damage to these women. So, and that's why I think it's really good what you're doing, because you're trying to obviously make people aware of that, which I think is very effective. So, very good. All right. Well, Jackie, I appreciate you being on with me today. And guys, like I said, I will go ahead and link a few of her articles that she has written. And then if you want to get a hold of her, you can just leave comments below the video, and then she can respond to comments as well, or I can forward stuff to her and she can respond to those who she wishes to respond to. So, Jackie, thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you.
All right.